This story is about firefighters and prisoners. Firefighting prisoners, to be exact. Supervised by professional firefighters up here at what was once Camp 16 atop Mount Gleason, northeast of Los Angeles. I say used to be because in 2009, the station fire ripped through these mountains, scorching 160,000 acres and completely consuming Camp 16. Almost 100 inmate firefighters were nearly cut off from escape by the flames, and in the midst of it, 2 men would die in the chaos. California has 4 seasons: green, brown, red, and black. Rains allow shrubs to grow, dry weather kills them off, Santa Ana winds from the desert dry everything even more and lower humidity, and then a small spark is all it takes. Wildfires happen often. So much so that back when I was an attack helicopter pilot, I was part of a squadron that had both attack and utility aircraft. The utility helicopter crews, in their Hueys, were all trained in Bambi bucket operations and would both train for and participate in firefighting operations. Within the state, CAL FIRE is a large organization and in conjunction with inmate rehabilitation enlists low-threat prisoners in their ranks as temporary firefighters, helping to reduce sentences as well as impart skills on those who will be rejoining society in the near future. This is beneficial for both the firefighting operations as well as the inmate community. Several dozen of these inmate firefighters found themselves here on Mount Gleason in August of 2009. What was once a Nike missile site during the Cold War, Camp 16, located at an elevation of 5,600 feet, over a mile high, was one of dozens of camps, which simultaneously act as operating bases as well as minimum security prisons up in the mountains and surrounding areas around Los Angeles. Here at Mount Gleason, they were approximately 15 miles from where the station fire originated on August 26, 2009. Their job was to do whatever they could to slow down this section of the rapidly building fire, which started southeast of them, supposedly by arson, as determined by accelerants found after the fire was contained. Thousands were evacuated, and the fire threatened over 12,000 structures in and around the Angeles National Forest, as well as the communities along the edges of the forest, including parts of Los Angeles and its eastern metropolis. After a long, dry summer, there was plenty of combustible material to fuel the flames. On August 30th, 4 days after the first report, the firefighters here at Mount Gleason found themselves face to face with the station fire. The nearly 100 members of what was known as the Wolf Pack of Camp 16 had watched as haze had turned to smoke, smoke had turned to nearby flames, and as the day went on, the situation deteriorated into all-out carnage. The preventative measures they had undertaken in the preceding days were quickly being overtaken by the speed of the fire. Early in the afternoon, the daylight had turned to darkness from the smoke and ash. Firefighters described how, despite the fact it was 3 in the afternoon, it was as dark as 2 in the morning. They were almost entirely surrounded by flames, reportedly to be 300 feet high in some areas. Things got to be so bad that the last stand protocol was enacted, whereby all of the firefighters would go to the most protective shelter, in this case the chow hall, and hunker down. While the camp was consolidating in the chow hall, outside the base was Captain Ted Hall and firefighting specialist Arnie Quinones. They had been attempting a firing operation, pre-burning sections of dry brush along a line in an attempt to prevent the fire from crossing to the base. As the situation got worse, though, they realized an evacuation was going to be necessary and were clearing the road along the main route of the mountain. Dense smoke clouded visibility, making it almost impossible to see in front of their vehicle. Their last radio call-in was at approximately 4:15 p.m., saying they were returning to camp several hundred meters up the road. They never arrived. Follow-on attempts to contact them were met with silence. By 5:15, they were officially reported missing. By then, the camp was on fire. The surrounding structures were ablaze, and the kitchen of the chow hall was now on fire as well. A decision had to be made by the professional firefighters on what was best to get themselves and their inmate crews off the mountain. The remaining 60 members of the team piled into the crew carrier and steadily made their way down the mountain. Disaster was barely averted. By 5:41, the camp had burned over in its entirety. Captain Hall and Specialist Quinones had disappeared. They weren't seen during the evacuation and were not at the bottom of the mountain when the crew arrived. The fire continued spreading outwards, burning Mount Gleason nearly in its entirety. It wouldn't be until days later, during search and recovery operations, that the truck the two firefighters had been driving was found. Located 800 feet below the camp in a canyon, they had inadvertently driven off a ledge, unable to see through the smoke, ash, and heat. Both men had died in the resulting impact. They are now memorialized at the location. The station fire continued to grow until containment operations began to have an effect. By September 4th, it was at 42% contained. By September 15th, over 2 weeks after the events at Camp 16, the fire was considered 91% contained, and by then almost $100 million had been spent fighting it. Full containment was expected by September 19th, but the Santa Ana winds added to the timeline, with dry desert air flowing east to west, and it wasn't until rain showers brought a degree of moderate precipitation that the fire was fully extinguished on October 16th, almost a month and a half after the destruction of Camp 16. The station fire would become the 9th largest wildfire in California's modern history, and the largest in LA County, destroying 251 square miles. Captain Hall and Specialist Quinones' death were ruled a homicide due to the suspicion of arson being the cause of the ignition. Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger offered a $100,000 reward for information leading to an arrest and conviction. As far as I can tell, though, no one has ever been apprehended. For several years, the charred remains of Camp 16 stood here, still visible on Google Maps. It wasn't until a few years ago that they were torn down, and very little remains of the site. A few foundations can be seen, and some infrastructure, and the memorial built to honor Captain Hall and Specialist Quinones. Thanks for watching. You can check out another video here. Thanks to my Patreon subscribers for helping me get here. And as always, until next time, get lost.